Well, hello everyone. This is Jason Zeidema of NAMMA, the North American Maritime Ministry Association. Today I'm joined by Reverend Marsh Draghi, who is the Executive Director of Seafarers International House, but also serves as the President of NAMMA. His term, in fact, was supposed to end about 10 days ago at the NAMMA conference, which has been postponed. But here he is still serving in this extraordinary time in his extraordinary role. Well, thank you, Marsh, for being with us, and thank you to everyone who's on the call. I think there are well over 20 folks who are registered and should be joining us in the coming minutes on this call. So for this call, we're using a technology called GoToWebinar, and happy to use it. And in these first few minutes, we're going to hear from Marsh, and then also I'll give a short introduction about what the call will be about. But most of the call, I want to be able to hear from you and to hear local stories of how you're facing the challenges of coronavirus. And in order to do that, I wanted to just introduce the platform that we're on, GoToWebinar, so you understand how we're going to work. So this right now, everyone is on mute, and I have the power to unmute you so that we don't hear everybody at once. We're keeping everybody on mute. But later on, when I call on you or call on sort of someone from your port or your area to speak, and if you wish to speak, what you'll need to do is raise your hand. And how you do that is on the control panel. You'll see on the control panel, you'll see right now your microphone is probably red, it's muted. And then over, you'll see a little line where there's a little hand. And what I'd like you to do right now is just click on that hand to raise your hand and lower your hand. If you could click on it, so I can see that you are all alive and well. Oh, so many of you are clicking on the little hand. That's wonderful. So if you could click it to raise your hand and then click it to put your hand down so that we can, when we come back to the point of questions, then you're going to want to raise your hand. So if you can just click it again to make your hand go away, that would be great. The other way, so that's one way of noting your presence. The other way is by questions. And questions are, you can ask in the question bar, and you can ask a question. So you can go ahead and ask a question already. If you have a question, then you can put one there. There you go, exactly. So someone just asked a question. So if you have a question, you can put it there. So as you're listening to me, or as you're listening to Marsh, or as you're listening to someone else, you don't have to wait to ask your question. You can pop it in there already, and you can ask a question that comes up, and then we can come back to that question later on in the hour. We'd like to keep this to 1 hour exactly, so we should have enough time to hear from many of you. And as I said, we hope that this hour is informative, but also that this hour is especially encouraging to you. I've found that I miss you. I missed greatly being with you at the various meetings. I miss the fact that many of us were supposed to see each other a week ago in Ottawa at the NAMMA conference. I miss being able to say hi and be together with you in person. And so hopefully this little conversation gives us a chance to say hello and to hear each other. So before I invite Marsh to say a few words, what I'd like to do is just say a few things about what I've been up to and what I've been hearing, and it sort of just gives the frame of reference for what we're doing. In the last few days, I've had regional conversations just like this with the rest of the NAMMA network. On Wednesday, we had it with a group of about 25 from Canada. Yesterday, we had a conversation with those on the Gulf Coast. Today, here on the East Coast. And then early next week, I'll be scheduling one on the West Coast and having different conversations, recorded conversations with those around the world as well, that some of you have seen, and I'll send links to those as they come out. Well, what have I been hearing? Well, one thing about this whole virus is the worldwide nature of it. I'm only middle-aged, but I haven't seen anything like this before, where it's just in our generation, perhaps since September 11th, something that has so profoundly impacted the world in such a wide way. Some key problems on the seafarer side, ones that we probably note. We all see things happening in our own lives. Seafarers, in some ways, even have it amplified. The real challenges of repatriation, bringing seafarers home, bringing new seafarers on board. This is a huge problem in many of our ports and many places. Because of border closures, many countries are entirely closed, so getting seafarers in and out is a kind of a moot point. It's difficult to move them when borders are closed. Certificate expiration, the various kinds of certificates and documentation that seafarers have, the length of their contract, these are all really difficult things. Passports, when passport offices are closed, how do you get renewals of passports? Certificates can be renewed. Passports is another issue altogether. Those really can't be renewed, or you can't make a passport longer. It really needs to be renewed when, and you need to often go in physically in person to get passports renewed. Seafarers, dock workers, we ourselves, questions of PPE, personal protective equipment, masks and gloves and hand sanitizer, etc. All of these were very difficult issues, still are difficult. What is the kind of PPE we need? How do we need to do that? In different ports, it's answered in different ways, and I'll be happy to interact with you one-on-one if you have any questions about that. One of the big challenges with new crew coming on board is how do they get tested? How do they do quarantine on board ships or in ports? This is a real headache. And one that's off our radar screen from the seafarers we see, but definitely on the radar screen of those back at home, will any of them get new contracts? When will they get new contracts? How does that work? In the cruise sector, this is a huge issue. Those who are finally going home, when or will they actually get new contracts in the foreseeable future? There's a lot of great trauma and challenges in their lives. So what are the effects? Effects on all of us, I suppose, but certainly among seafarers. Fatigue, stress, frustration, social isolation, and amplification of social isolation. So that's on the level of seafarers. How are you all doing? Well, I brought one person on the line to talk about his experience, and also perhaps to have just one point of view. Marsh, welcome to the call. Wondering if you could say a few words from your perspective. How have you been doing? How have you, as the Seafarers International House with your deployed chaplains in various ports, how have you been doing? And perhaps what are some of the takeaways that from your seat that you're feeling that can sort of prime the conversation for us hearing from everyone else on the call?
Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. Like Jason, I miss you all. I was hoping to see many of you in Ottawa last week, and of course, those things have changed dramatically. But you continue to be in my prayers and my thoughts. I am so grateful for the weekly meditation that we have with Gary and with others who are leading that as our Ecumenical Affairs organization committee. They have really been helpful to me spiritually and personally, just to see your faces, at least a few of them. And I think one thing that has really been kind of rooting around my brain is the road to Emmaus and the resurrected Christ. And how do we encounter that resurrected Christ in this time of pandemic? To be honest, my eyes have been at times occluded and have been hard to recognize Jesus in some of the challenges that we've had. As it says in Luke, the disciples didn't recognize Jesus right away, and their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And there have been times when I have to admit I've had a hard time recognizing Jesus in the midst of this storm. We at Seafarers International House, like all of you, have had our entire world turned upside down. We depend a lot on our guest house to be a financial engine for our work at the ports, and that just came to a screeching halt on March, well, the middle of March. We had to lay off all of our guest house staff. All of them are like family to us, and it was really hard. We continued to house a few seafarers who are, again, kind of stuck here. They're not able to get on ships because of the lack of crew changes. And we also work with some immigrants that stayed with us. But I think it was Palm Sunday where I just could not recognize Jesus. I wanted to be happy for the triumphal entry of hosannas, but I was in a dark place, and I couldn't see how this was going to work and how we were going to continue to do ministry. We had to lay off some of our port chaplains, mostly in ports where they weren't able to get onboard ships anyway. But then a respite care group approached us and said, we have need of you. Is there room in the inn? Kind of question. And as of last Friday at this time, they took over our guest house, and they are going to be using our beds so that recuperating COVID patients can finish their isolation in our guest house. To protect our seafarers and others, we needed to relocate them to another hotel here in Midtown Manhattan, and we've been able to do that. And now I've just seen all sorts of, again, reminders of how Jesus works in the midst of our pain and in the midst of our challenges. It's not easy. Our port chaplains are doing mostly just gangway type of passing up supplies up the gangway. Some are not able to get close to ships at all. But we are seeing more and more the good things, not of this virus. The virus is a scourge, but the good things that are happening, the way that people are adapting, the way that people are continuing to keep their eyes on Jesus in the midst of all this. So it feels strange to go back into our guest house now because I have to sign in myself and I have to take my temperature, and I don't go back too often because it is kind of a germ fest there. But we are adapting, and we are making a new way of serving our community, our seafarers, and I want to hear more about how all of you are doing as well.
Well, thank you, Marsh, for that update. We had a question from Leslie Warwick down in Fort Lauderdale, just wondering if you're still living at Seafarers International House. But then the second question I asked, I'd like to ask, can you say just briefly also something about how you've navigated some of the financial issues insofar as finding any of the federal or state or local monies? Just some brief note on those monies about what others might learn from your triumphs or failure.
Yeah. Well, we have applied for some grants from ITF, from the KT Foundation, from SIU. We're using those grants to put up our seafarers in this Midtown hotel with no real contributions from them at this point, which is nice. They are caught like a lot of people without the ability to find employment at this point. And so we are grateful to those funders for some help. Hi, Leslie. I'm glad that you're on the call. No, Ann and I, my wife and I, are not able to stay in our apartment in the guest house for obvious reasons. We want to be safe, and so we have relocated a handy 7 blocks north in the apartment of a friend, and we're grateful for that option. Finally, we are exploring the PPP, the Payroll Protection, no, the Paycheck Protection Plan, I think. Leslie has navigated some of those waters, and we have found it really complicated for a lot of reasons. We missed the first deadline because we were kind of overwhelmed with the transition of our guest house. But as you know, the Congress has passed an additional amount of money for it. I think yesterday and today the president is slated to sign it, and we are applying for that, but it is complicated. We didn't have a loan out with any bank at this point, so it was hard for us to find a bank that would take on our case. We finally found a bank, and we are finding that there's some idiosyncrasies when you're dealing with the payroll of, for an example, ordained people and contracted people, that sort of thing. But we're working through it. We are hoping to be included now in this next wave. And I would encourage all of you, if you have any questions, you know, let me know, let others know. I would just encourage you to stick with it and to not get discouraged, and to reach out if you have any questions.
Thanks for the note, Marsh, on that. Indeed, today I don't want to spend too much time on some of those the details of all those, or we could spend our hours plus many more simply talking about how to apply and all the details of applying. But if you have any questions, please do talk to me. That would be great. What I'd like to do at this time is open up the mics to hear the experience of others. And so again, going back to your dashboard, you can see your hands. Some of you still have your hands up. I don't know if that means you actually still have a question or not, but you can put your hand down if you think you still, if you put it up in error earlier. But what I'd like to do is just go through go around the coast and have maybe one person from each port give an update on what services are still being provided, or what challenges, particular special challenges that you might have. And so I'm wondering if there might be a person who could kick things off. If you have your hand up, that means I might open your microphone. I'm wondering if we might start with the top, some of the top ports. I'm wondering if Stephen Cushing up in Boston might give us an update on what's happening at the New England Seafarers mission. Stephen, would that be something you could do? If so, if you could put up your hand, that would be great, and I can open up your microphone if you are around. Stephen Cushing, go ahead. Hello, Stephen. Oh, something's wrong with his microphone. I cannot hear you, Stephen.
How's that?
There you go.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep.
It helps to push it all the way into the little hole. Good morning. And sorry, when I heard you say my name, I rushed around to get a microphone and, and headphones. So repeat the question, please, Jason.
Please tell us what is happening at New England Seafarers Mission and in the port of Boston, and what are you able to do, what aren't you able to do, and what challenges and joys are you finding in this situation?
So for Boston, and we have partners in the area, Seafarers Friend, they're in the north part of Boston. So I'm speaking for South Boston, South Shore, and down in Providence. We are, our Seafarer Center is open, but of course nobody is coming here except for Sharon and I, my wife, who works full-time here with me. We have contacted the agents, told them we are available for emergency visits to the ships, and our chaplain in Providence, Ashley Peckham, is operating the same. Both he and I fall into a little bit of the vulnerable category, being over 60. I have asthma. Ashley is nearly 80. He actually got tested for coronavirus and proved negative. So we're sort of not rushing right now to get close to the ships. What we are doing is we did apply for a grant from ITF Seafarers Trust, received a very generous grant from them. We are redesigning. A lot of places are already doing this. So we are, I guess, in a sense, catching up with them, but we're redoing our website and have added a new website, which I call the Seafarers Online Boston. It is kind of similar to what Danny does down in Port Everglades and in Cape Canaveral, making our store online and available so that crew members could then go there from industrial ship, see what they want, place an order. We are using Square. That's our retail app that we use for our cruise ship center store. We're also making available visits for MoneyGram and for our package service if the seafarers want to take advantage of that. Our strategy is this, Jason. We're seeing what we can develop right now to help seafarers in the conditions that you described for current, but also with a mind to how can I sustain that if and when cruise ships return, probably not this year, but next year. We're relatively small, so I want to make sure that whatever we start, we can keep going. I don't want to just drop it once cruise ships come back and tell the industrial ships too bad. So we're taking our time and asking. I've been asking a lot of centers around the country how they do these kind of things, how they employ them. We've not laid anybody off. We did receive the PPP grant from the United States, which we're thankful for. So we were able to put together funding for the rest of this year. 2021 is a different story, and we'll see what happens with that. So there's a quick answer. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, Stephen, for that update. There's a bunch of different things I'm sure that others might have a comment on and might be writing down. I'm wondering if Ida over at Seaman's Friend might be available. If you want to put up your hand, I can recognize you, Ida. Or we can continue to slide down the coast more towards New York, Newark, and others, either from Seaman's Friend in Boston or coming into Newark and New York. Are there any others in that area that would have any update? Timothy Wong from the Newark Center. Go ahead, Timothy.
Morning all, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay, so yes, Port Newark. We've been working remotely since March 20th, our center was open. And so our team of chaplains have been working remotely. And what we established in a relatively short amount of time, I think it was about 2.5 days, we got our chaplains up and running with different channels where they're able to communicate with seafarers. So we had set up a channel with WhatsApp, on Facebook, along with our chaplain email address, so that we have these different channels to basically communicate with seafarers. Our team has also reached out digitally through their list of digital Rolodex to these seafarers to basically check in on them, provide any pastoral care that they need. One of the other things that we were able to do, and thanks to you, Jason, for sending out the information about the different hardship grants, they've been screening them for these grants to see who was eligible, who might be a good fit. And one of our chaplains was able to apply, help the seafarers apply for the ISWAN Hardship Fund. And we got word yesterday that 2 of them were approved, waiting on word for the 3rd application to see if they get approved as well. So that's been, what they've been keeping our chaplains busy. In addition, they've also been making some videos. Father James did a video for Palm Sunday and also one for Easter Sunday, and he was able to do that in English and also his native tongue of Tagalog. And it was viewed pretty good from according to the metrics that our director of communications informed us about. And Cora also was able to do a video with Dr. Johnny and was able to ask some questions, not the normal questions that we already know the answers to, but some other questions that I guess would help seafarers to cope during this time and help them, calm any fears and concerns that they might have. So they will be able to produce that video, which was helpful for the seafarers as well. Future plans moving ahead, we are planning to reopen internally our center just for necessary and limited staff, meaning myself and our team of chaplains, and this will go into effect on Monday, May 4th. So we're gonna start going out there and do these ship visits. I think it's gonna be mostly relegated to gangway visits, but we're gonna be starting that again on May 4th. And we have different phases that we're looking at as we look to open the center in these coming weeks. So phase 2 will be basically dependent on when these restrictions will be lifted on seafarer having their shore leave, and also when the restrictions will be lifted on public gatherings and or use of the gym. So that, our phase 2 reopening will depend on when those things happen. So in a nutshell, that's basically what's been going on with Seamen's Church in Port Newark.
Thank you so much, Timothy, for some of those, having some of those hard numbers in the phases. I think that's really interesting and useful for other people to hear, that there's maybe some, a way going forward in this. I think now Ida has put up her hand. Ida, back up in Boston. That's Seafarer's Friend. Ida, go ahead.
Yes, good morning still. We are, like Steve Cushing said, we're working together. Him, the northern Boston, the southern Boston, us, the northern. But we also go into Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and into Portland, Maine. We have had a discussion just recently on Wednesday as to moving forward in this situation. We had one of the ship agents get in touch with us this week. We did visit a ship to supply SIM cards to them, well over 20 SIM cards. And what we did is very cautiously, of course, the chaplain had the mask and the gloves. We actually, using the gloves, because the SIM cards were not used for over 14 days or not touched, we were able to activate them. We put them in a Ziploc bag and brought it then to the crew member and dispersed it. He then took the money, put it in a Ziploc bag, and took it back with him. And he will keep that for 14 days so that anything that might be out there is not going to, aggravate or ruin the situation between seafarer and chaplain. He was very comfortable doing that. What we are implementing slowly is a key point person contacting the shipping agents before a ship comes in, getting a hold of the captain of the ship, either through the shipping agent or directly through an email. We've not done that in the past, and so this is new for us. We will be keeping a database that, and Jason, I will talk to you about that later, a database on the captain of the ship, a way to contact him, and an initial crew member, so that we can communicate ahead of time and before they dock, and then afterwards when they leave. So to keep up with their with our communication with them to see if everything is well and progressing. So we're at the beginning stages of some of the other centers, and I really will be looking out to the other centers to help us along so that we can, at this point, have great communication with the ships that come into our ports. So that's what.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, your last words off. Thank you, Ida, for sharing with us those things. That issue of communication and how we communicate with ships certainly has been on the high radar screen for many others. So indeed, happy to work together. Wondering if we could go down the coast, all the way down even. If I know on the call there is Paul Rosenblum from Charleston, Leslie Warwick down from Fort Lauderdale. Maybe you can hear Mary Davison also asked a question down in Baltimore. I'm wondering if Paul Rosenblum, who is Deacon Paul Rosenblum in Charleston, Paul, if you have any comment about maybe about Charleston, but also being the regional director for North America for Stella Maris, the Apostleship of the Sea, you might also have some regional comment. Paul, if you could put up your hand if you are listening, I would be happy to recognize you if you have any comment. Paul, go ahead.
Well, good morning, Jason. Good morning, Marsh, and everybody else. I think here, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Okay. I think the situation here in Charleston is much the same as every place else. We closed our centers down. Well, we stopped some of our services. Our centers are still open in case any of the seafarers want to come over and use the Wi-Fi. There's almost no sign of any activity. Occasionally a chair is moved, which means somebody was in here, but it's hard. Other than that, there hasn't been much activity at all. We stopped transportation about the 23rd of March or so, and stopped ship visiting at that time, and told our volunteers, most of whom are in the upper ages, as I am as well, and susceptible, so for their own safety as well, the volunteers were told not to come out to the centers any longer. I come out 3 or 4 times a week. I stopped my own ship visiting about that same time because I am of a certain age, and also because my wife is immunocompromised because of her medication she takes. Have gotten several calls, not calls, Facebook messages, etc., to do shopping trips for seafarers. So spent hours sometimes at Walmart buying up the entire supply of Pringles and candy and M&Ms and things like that. Have a few seafarers who want to have relatives send packages to be delivered here to bring them aboard as well, and I'm waiting on some of those. I have decided to reduce my own restrictions in the last week or so, and I'm starting to make visits to the gangways. Mostly, I get as far as the bottom of the gangway and just ask and see if they need anything. And sometimes a phone call or a WhatsApp message or a Facebook message will follow after that. Yesterday, I had the first time that I actually was able to go up a gangway and actually went into the ship's office, which surprised me, and talked to the chief officer, a Chinese crew, and did a little shopping trip for them. I hadn't realized how popular playing cards are these days, because when I got to Walmart, I got the last 4 packs of playing cards in the entire store. So it was playing cards and cigarette lighters was what this crew wanted primarily. So that's the status of the ministry here. We've never, and this is something I find unusual, and maybe other people can comment on this as well. We have never received any instructions from any government authority of any sort about what we should be doing and should not be doing. We've kind of been left on our own to figure things out. Now, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're an analytical, scientific person like I am, you want instructions about things. And so that, that has left me a little bit maybe uneasy sometimes, because I don't know what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing. But be that as may, the port is working full speed, and we're doing what little we can for the seafarers as best we can. We are trying to keep in touch with the volunteers. We have not video, but email reflections that are sent out several times a week to keep in touch with the volunteers as well. From a regional AOS standpoint, we did request proposals from various ports who to submit to ITF and the TK Foundation. Those are were submitted to AOS in the UK for putting it together as one big package, which is what was requested of us. I do not know the status of any of those so far. We have been contacted recently. This is something ongoing by the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration of the Philippines, the embassy from the embassy in Washington, D.C., to see if we could help with seafarers who are in hospital or in hotels recovering from that. We've arranged for a couple of visits. There were not a lot of them that we've seen. I think there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 seafarers, Filipino seafarers, who are documented to be suffering from the coronavirus, and we're trying to help what little we can there as well. I know down in Leslie knows about this as well, that Father Peter Lynn and Father Sandy Sears made a visit to one of the seafarers in one of the hotels there a few days ago. And there are some others around the country that we might just want to keep aware of. That's really about how things stand right here. Probably about the same story. We are, again, waiting to hear about the grants that we've submitted. I don't know, from the AOS side, we've gone to the ITF emergency fund and the TK Foundation. I don't know if from the larger group that I work with here, the Charleston Port and Seafarers Society, whether anything has been done to request funding from the U.S. government or the Small Business Administration. I don't know if anybody else from Charleston is is attending this. Maybe they could comment on that. But we're managing as best we can and doing the best we can under the circumstances.
Well, thank you so much, Deacon Paul, for all of those comments. There's a number of things in there to unpack. Certainly, if we can slide up the coast again to hear a few more comments. I'm wondering if anyone from either Baltimore or Philadelphia has any comment. Either Reverend Mary Davison or I think on the call there are some from Baltimore, Helene or Jasper on the call. You can put up your little hands and I can recognize you. Yes, Helene Pearson from Seaman's Church in Philadelphia. Go ahead, Helene.
Hi, everybody. We have been open. We had a little bit of a warning from New York in the spread. It is certainly quite challenging here, being the state with the second most cases. It is really, really stressful. Personally, I have a mother in a nursing home. I have a daughter that's supposed to get married in a month, and she's also pregnant. So personally, I'm incredibly stressed. On the seafarer front, though, because of New York and the spread initially being in North Jersey, we just had like a little bit of warning time to never have to shut down. And we have gone from what would be 3 to 6 ship visitors a day to 1 to 2. In the beginning, seafarers were still going off ship, but that quickly changed. And we go and we raised a couple $1,000s in private funds, and we bring every ship a bag of Philadelphia pretzels. And our most often comment that we have right now on what we call the SCI web app, which is where we track our visits, is sad for extended contracts, happy for pretzels, or they call them biscuits, or they call them cookies. Also very early on, and Jason has been just great with support, hasn't he, with some of his videos. When I had questions, he almost simultaneously showed up with the right video at the right time. And some other chaplains, I think in New York, at first, we would have some feedback that seafarers were scared if we showed up in a mask, but it quickly changed to scared if we didn't show up in a mask. And just listening to that early on, we set out to design a T-shirt for the times, and we now show up in these bright yellow long sleeve T-shirts with a big sideways smiley face on, and on the back it has our logo and the pretzel, and it says thank you for bringing our essential needs, because isn't it wonderful that they can keep our supermarkets stocked. Jasper wants you to know, and he is on this call as well, that he shopped for chocolate and nuts for seafarers yesterday. Today I am trying my first hand at the Facebook Marketplace to get a seafarer an iPhone 11, of course. And we've done the Best Buy curbside pickup for ships that can order online, and then we can deliver it to the ship. Mostly they're still making us walk up the gangway, and we deliver Wi-Fi, which is so valued at this time, to be able to give free Wi-Fi to the ships. The Coast Guard has been incredible, and it's not it should be acknowledged that it was the long work of Doug Stevenson and others to get the Seafarers Access Rule through after 9/11/2001, that we have lockstep been considered essential workers under the Coast Guard, with the Coast Guard in the first couple of weeks checking in, as busy as he was with us personally, every 3 days or so. So it's tough for the seafarer. We gave our staff the option to work or not work. And we've been operating at about 40% staff since the beginning. I think we got our PPP, but I'm not sure, and I'm slightly worried because we were in early, but I'm slightly worried about my bank not being on it, because I'm hearing other people have already received their funding, and I have not gotten that notification. We checked in along the way, and she assured me, but I'm just slightly worried about that. So I aim to get in touch with her right after this call. So that's what's going on here.
Thank you very much, Helene, for that update. There again a number of things to unpack, and maybe we'll hear from the next few folks. I want to recognize again Leslie Warwick, and then I'll come back to Mary Davison in just a moment. Leslie Warwick, who was on the call. Where did she go? Leslie Warwick. Your mic is open, Leslie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I had to miss part of the call and step away, but I am back. So I don't know all of what's been said, but I'll try and do this quickly. We're operating at our casa. Our admin team is operating remotely. We started that in mid-March, and that's been working really well for us. We are, my cell phone keeps ringing. It has a way of doing that. It drives me crazy. We are busy. I feel like I'm busier than I've ever been because I'm trying to find money even more desperately than usual. But we were successful with our application for the Paycheck Protection Program, and that money has already showed up in our account. And ITF and TK were both very generous to us. So I really have done this with my own team already, but my hat is off to them, to my colleague Anmati Sukhan, who does our bookkeeping. Just, I think she typed her little fingers to the bone and got everything done in rapid record time. So we are holding our own until the fall. We had planned our big gala for May and had to delay that. So we're now doing a lot of research on virtual galas and what other options are. So there's that side of things. My workload has doubled because my executive committee is doing what good executive committees do. They are driving me crazy. And we are having weekly meetings, which is actually part of the protocol that you hear in business, where you are in a burning house financially. You have to keep watching everything constantly and keep finding buckets of water to throw on things. So we are doing a good job of that. On the pastoral front, Father Sandy remains engaged. We've started a new push to handle virtual connection with seafarers. We're taping prayers by different members of our pastoral team and posting those Mondays. So you'll see on our Facebook a Monday prayer that goes up, and the outreach being done to crew via social media is really growing. It's actually kind of amazing. The new thing for us, new and not new because we are so involved with the cruise organizations, is that as we have passed through the initial shock of all this pandemic and everything that has meant to the big ships coming in, we have now entered into a phase where we are being contacted by cruise lines to visit crew that are in quarantine in hotels. So as recently as this last weekend, a couple things happened. We got a request via the Philippine embassy to connect with a crew member in a hotel in Fort Lauderdale who had been tested for COVID and was released into 14-day quarantine in his hospital gown with no clothes. So wow. In his hotel room with nothing to wear and no other sort of hospitality items. So Sandy went to Walmart and bought clothes and took food over and took toiletry kits and pretty much everything we could think of, made connections with this man. So, and everything, of course, we're doing everything with masks and gloves and all precautions. Because if you haven't heard, certainly South Florida is considered to be one of the hot spots. After the initial visit, the seafarer asked for fresh fruit and vitamins because the food in the hotel is horrible. So and I said, oh, please take him something fun too. So Sandy went and got fruit and vitamins and Easter candy, and the seafarer loves Peeps, apparently. Peeps, it's all about the Peeps. So I said to him, while you're there, find out who else is in the hotel. I'm sure the cruise line is contracted with that hotel to fill it up with seafarers, and sure enough, there are a number of folks in that hotel, and that got us rolling. I reached out to the cruise line and said, we need to do this in a more organized way, give us a list. So they've sent a spreadsheet that has 30 names on it at different hotels in our area as of yesterday, And I just got off the phone with her this morning, and she's sending more names. And she explained that the procedure from the cruise side has been to, they have what they call care teams who are supposed to handle these kinds of situations. But worldwide, they're just overwhelmed, and she was just tearing her hair out with me verbally. She's somebody I've known for years, and we talk to one another quite candidly. And she said, I don't know what these people are doing. She said, we've subcontracted with XYZ company, and they couldn't get people who would go into the rooms, even though we know that not all of these people are COVID victims. Some of them are somebody who's recovering from appendicitis and needs to stay in a hotel till we can get her on an airplane, because that's the other part of this, is there are no flights to get anybody out of here. So the subcontracted people weren't willing to handle certain cases, so they found another subcontractor to the subcontractor who is willing to handle certain cases. And I raised an issue with her after reading an article in the paper this morning about what's going on in New York, where the hospitals are sending people who are in recovery, as Marsh talked about early with his scenario there, which, Marsh, I don't know if you saw the fangirl note I sent you, but when I first read that, I thought that was a brilliant thing to do, and God bless you for doing it. So people are leaving the hospitals in New York and going to hotels. And what's happened, according to an article in the New York Times, is there have been deaths in the hotels that nobody knew about. They found out after the fact. And so the question has become, in these hotel situations, is anybody calling these people daily a wellness check? So in my conversation with the cruise line today, she said, I'm so frustrated with our subcontractor because they are not doing that. And so we don't know. So I said, well, consider us your wellness checkers. We will check in with them. And if we can visit them, we will. And if we can't, we'll talk to them on the phone. Sometimes there's a reluctance on the part of the seafarer to get on the phone or take a phone call from somebody. But Sandy's approach is going to be to go and visit as many as he can in person, establish the connection, and then take it from there. The other thing I learned today is that, of course, CBP is not letting any of these people back on board, so they're going to be living in these hotels for a while until we can figure out how to get them home. So what I said to her is, look, I need a better feel, because we are going to be talking to Royal Caribbean too. This group that we're talking to now, this woman is explicitly with Princess, but of course Princess is part of the Holland America group. So we are seeing folks from the Zaandam, the Rotterdam, any ship that's got people that are having to stay in this area. So I said, I need to know, what's the scope here? How long do we think this is going to last? How many people are we talking about? And, you know, we can do and will do anything that we can, but we have to be realistic. This is extraordinary, and I need to be sure that I'm not putting my own team in harm's way. And so it has to be a calculated response. So that's been my life in the last 24 to 48 hours. So Marsh, I completely sympathize with you. It's like nothing I've ever been through before.
Well, God bless you, Leslie. I'm glad that you're hanging in there.
Thank you, Leslie. We're coming up against our time, but I'd like to be able to still get to Mary Davison in Baltimore. Mary, if you're there, I will open your microphone. Mary, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, wonderful.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so listening to all this has just reminded me all over again how different ports are. So Baltimore, the Baltimore Center is still one full-time staff, that's me, with up to 2,000 vessel arrivals a year. So even our normal operations are quite different from what I've been hearing. We do not have people wandering into our center to use Wi-Fi because you could not get to our center even in normal circumstances unless we drove you there, because we are in a sprawling port where it's extremely difficult to get any kind of escort ashore unless we do it. We have never had enough volunteers to fulfill all the transportation requests of the up to 14 crews in port every day. But we've done a lot. So since the implementation of TWIC, our specialties have been pastoral care and advocacy as needed and transportation. That's been our focus. And now we can't do transportation at all and only a few kinds of pastoral care. So yeah, basically most of our revenue has stopped because a lot of it was transportation donations or a fundraiser, which like everyone else, we had to cancel our fundraiser and so on. Our volunteers are mostly 70s and 80s, so they stopped coming in early March. My SIH colleague, Bob Schmidt, and our contract ship visitor, Don Bryant, and I are in our 60s with nice, strong immune systems. So we were kind of okay with continuing until it became clear how easy it would be, even without symptoms, and even thinking we're being careful to infect our crews. And that whole concern in my case was magnified by an incident that happened in my extended family, where someone was exposed, and it turned out okay, but I'm very conscious of asymptomatic carriers and I don't want to be one. And I also have a diabetic spouse. So at that time, the board and I decided we would discontinue cold calls. None of our crews are going ashore anyway, so that was a no-brainer. Our governor was introducing increasingly strict orders. It would not be illegal for me to go to a vessel at this point, because, you know, welfare workers are essential workers. And we are very much available for pastoral emergencies, which I'm happy to say have not happened yet. But I really wouldn't want to use PPE, which there's big shortage of in Maryland, and unless there were that type of compelling reason. So I've been working mostly at home. Either I or one of our part-timers goes in almost every day to pick up mail and to pick up files we need for the grant applications that my treasurer and I are working on from home. Trying to touch base with every volunteer at least once a week, mostly individually. We had our first Zoom meeting today. A couple of our older volunteers were very frustrated because despite all the ways that we tried to introduce it, they were not able to connect. So we have to find multiple ways to connect with them. I have a lot of folks that I think of as spies in the port. I'm sure we all do, but for some ships, my agent is the best connection. For others, it might be a pilot. For others, somebody who works at that terminal. And vendors have been helpful as well. We have gotten out the word through various port emails, Facebook, etc., that we are available by phone and email. So one of the things that does happen is I get calls asking for SIM cards. We have, because of our focus on transportation and because there's good vendors in this port, we refer those calls to the vendors, and talking to the vendors also gives me a window on what's happening in the port. I've let the vendor I talk to most often know that we have an emergency fund if a crew really could not afford SIM cards. So far, we have not had that request. So far, the crews I've connected with in various ways are in this port, are healthy, do have their provisions, are basically doing okay. The vendor that I talked to, even she is not doing cold calls. She's fulfilling orders that are placed through the ship's agent. So they really are limiting who can just show up. I've gone through all of our log records and my personal records of email and phone contacts I have with certain seafarers or certain vessels that come in regularly, and there've been some good conversations. In some ways, I think a lot better than what I would have on a stern ramp where you can hardly hear yourself think anyway. Particularly informative and extended correspondence with the medical officer on one vessel about how things are going for him and his crew. Oh, and the thing I did most recently was where the timing was really serendipitous was when there was a letter published in our local paper praising supply chain workers such as grocery store workers and so on. It was a fine letter, and I piggybacked off of that to send a letter in about the role of seafarers that I don't have to tell you what it said because you all know what you would say about that. But I got really lucky because the print publication of the letter was on a Sunday morning, and when people are shut in their houses on a Sunday morning, and yeah, a lot of people in Baltimore still read print newspapers. A lot of people I knew, or some I didn't know, saw it and reached out to connect with me. And the other serendipitous bit of timing was the letter was published. It had been published electronically a day or two earlier, but the print version appeared literally the morning after my online high school reunion. So we'd all been emailing each other about the reunion, and I got a lot of emails about this letter. And so I'm hoping that we're doing our best to stay on the radar in various ways. We've applied for the state payroll protection program, for the federal, and in consultation with Mission to Seafarers for an ITF grant as well, but don't know what's going to happen with any of those.
Well, Mary, thank you so much for telling us a bit about the work in Baltimore. We all have now a lot to chew on. I'm sorry the hour has come to an end. Thank you for all those who participated. I know there's a few others that would have liked to participate. It means we can perhaps do it again in a few weeks' time. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I'm wondering if Marsh, after you've heard everything here, we're right at time now, but would you have any concluding thought after hearing all of what you've heard? Something to sort of leave us with a note of encouragement after hearing what you've heard?
Simply, Christ is risen, and Christ is risen indeed. I've heard a lot of resurrection stories, a lot of essential stories of how people are continuing to reach out in new and fantastic ways. So good job, everyone. Thanks for what you're doing for the seafarers. I got a snapshot of Mary's letter in the Baltimore Sun from one of our board members in Baltimore, and it was so neat to be able to read that and to again be reminded that seafarers are ultimately invisible, but these are times when they are so necessary to provide us our supplies. And so I would just say good job, everyone, for being so creative and being so resilient. God bless you.
Thank you, Marsh, for those words. Thank you, everyone, for being on this call. You know my email address, and you might also know my telephone number. Please give me a call. I'm not going anywhere, so I'm happy to be on the other end of the line. Thank you so much. Have a great day. God bless you all.